Friday night, I was roused out of slumber in my lazy boy by the doorbell, and I noticed that my wife, Tracy, was still not in her usual spot on the living room couch. So, instead of Tracy going to the door while I continued to sleep, I had to put the chair in an upright position and get to the door myself. As I headed for the door, I noticed through the window that there were police lights flashing outside, at least a few police cars. Through the drowsy fog, I didn't realize they had stopped in front of my house until I opened the door and looked at the man at the door and the scene in front of me. The man at the door was armed with a handgun and identified himself as Sergeant John Kerrigan. He was supported by 2 uniformed officers, their guns also at the ready, and, as I was to quickly find out, there were 2 more uniformed police officers standing at my back door. I did what any sane person would do if they had 3 guns pointed at them. I put my hands up and retreated into the house, and the cops followed me. Apparently there was an incident at a local motel tonight, and they want to know where I've been all evening. I told them I got home from work at 6, went straight to the gym, and worked out until about 7:15, grabbed a snack of Arby's on the way home, and sat in front of the TV from about 8, watching reruns of Burn Notice and waiting for my wife to get home from her evening walk. And by the way, considering it was about 12:15, she was running late. So you don't have anyone who can confirm that you were here between 8 p.m. and about 11:30 p.m.? Inquired Kerrigan. Only 2 cats, I replied, trying to use humor to hide my growing discomfort. What the hell is going on? Mr. Easterling, it seems your wife and her friend were shot and killed tonight at the Safeway Motel on Grand Street, and since you have no alibi for that time period, you'll have to come with us. Shot dead? Stammered I. Oh, shit. She was with that piece of shit? Pete Lombardo? Exactly. How do you know that? Asked Kerrigan, looking at me askew. Because she was having an affair with that piece of shit, and that's probably where she was. My brain quickly rebooted as the cops looked around my house. They went through a bunch of our closets and drawers, with my permission, because honestly, I had no idea what they were looking for, until they found my Sig 9 and bagged it. And then it hit me. They think I killed my cheating whore wife. Fortunately for me, I hadn't fired a Sig since I was last at the range about 2 weeks ago, and ballistics tests would have confirmed it, but the fact that someone had killed my whore wife and her lover in their motel room and I had no alibi, it didn't bode well for old you-know-who. At the police station, Kerrigan insisted on hearing the whole sordid story about my marital status. Up to that point, the only people who knew everything were the private detective I'd hired when I found out Tracy was cheating on me, and an anonymous neighbor who left an envelope with a note outside my car one morning about 6 months ago, informing me of the affair. I threw the note away long ago, but it basically said that this neighbor saw my wife leaving a restaurant on the north side with a handsome young man in tow, and then gave him a quick peck on the lips before they got into their cars and drove away. I reread the note probably a dozen times, first not believing it, and then memorizing it the more I reread it. Tracy was the love of my life. I just couldn't believe she would ever leave me. We had 24 wonderful years of marriage, 2 children in college, 1 graduating from high school, and I had decided that this was the woman I would grow old with. At 47 years old, the same age as me, Tracy was still a woman who could cringe when she walked into a room. Long blonde hair, alabaster skin, sparkling blue eyes, 40 DD breasts, and a great ass to top it off at 5'2", distinguished by intelligence and class. I consider myself charming and adorable, but honestly don't know how I managed to get this girl. The note shook me to the core. I thought our life together was perfect. We had an active and vigorous sex life. She is incredibly responsive in bed, and I would do anything to please her. So why is she cheating on me? That's where the private investigator came in handy. I hired him to follow Tracy for a month, from the time she left the house in the morning to the time she returned to my place in the evening. Tracy usually got home before me because she worked a regular 8-to-5 job, but sometimes she would run errands, have a drink with the girls, or stay at work for an extra half hour. I trusted her completely and didn't give it a second thought, even when drinking with the girls caused her to get home after 10. Apparently, I'm an idiot because a lot of the errands, extra work, and drinking with the girls involved this Lombardo, the PI informed me. We live on the south side of a pretty big city, so hooking up on the north side at a bar and then a motel was usually the order of the day. And from what he'd been able to glean from conversations with several motel employees on the north side, the affair had been going on for about a year. Lombardo was apparently a fairly new co-worker of Tracy's at the bank where she worked. He was 24 years old, blonde and blue-eyed, with 6-pound abs and rather large arms. I'm not a wimp, but I'm not a very big guy either, so I guess it was the arms that got her. He was also a little more physical in his lovemaking than I was, which seemed to turn her on a lot. However, when I had tried exercise in the past, she had always refused it, saying she preferred lovemaking to just sex. With him, however, it wasn't about lovemaking, but pure sex. And judging from the video, they were having tons of fun. Kerrigan brought me back to the real world, telling me that he wanted a copy of all the materials he'd gotten from the private investigator, including recordings and observations, if my attorney and I didn't mind. I saw no problem with that, although I had the good sense to tell him that he should wait until I consulted with my attorney. At that point, I also felt it was my duty to let him know that I was meeting with a divorce attorney and was already making plans. I know this only added to my suspicions, but I figured Kerrigan would find out soon enough on his own, which would probably be even worse. I waited until Saturday morning and called my divorce lawyer at home to ask him to recommend a criminal defense attorney for me, telling him everything as I went along. He gave me Steve Seavey's name and said he would call him right away and get him to the police station so I could go home from there. Seavey arrived at the police station within the hour, and since the police had not arrested me, he returned me to my own home before lunch. We talked briefly about the case at my house, and Steve said he would make room for me in his schedule for Monday. After Steve left, I called all 3 kids and told them that their mother was dead, that she was cheating on me, and that I was suspect number 1. As I expected, the reaction from all 3 was mixed, although they all agreed that although I had the right to kill their mother, I still shouldn't have done it. It took a lot of explaining and a lot of hysterical sobbing to tell them that I didn't do it because someone had obviously beaten me to it. I told them not to come home yet, because it was still undecided, and I would let them know about the funeral when the police returned their mother's body to me. Our oldest child, Ava, is 23. She graduated from Indiana University and lives in California where she works in movie production. Our middle child, our son Robbie, is 21 and a junior at Michigan State University, and our youngest 19-year-old Cheyenne is a freshman at Western Michigan. They are all beautiful children who clearly got their looks from their mother and are also smart. They all had a hard time believing that Tracy was cheating on me and finally gave up when I threatened to send them candid photos from a private investigation. I think that's when each of them felt as devastated as I did, feeling a sort of punch in the gut and numbness. I remembered the first time a private investigator checked out an anonymous note that said Tracy was cheating on me. I literally threw up in the bathroom and cried for probably an hour. Then I watched all the videos and read all the notes and reports. Unbeknownst to my wife, I took the day off work to leisurely study everything, and when I was done, I put everything in a box in a closet in the basement. She came home from work a few hours later, not caring a care in the world, and from then on I had to play the loving husband while my insides were ripped out of me. Our sex life had been reduced to almost nothing because I usually excused myself on one pretext or another, and although Tracy seemed concerned at first, I assumed her side part satisfied her enough that she didn't mind too much. Of course, the few times we'd had sex, I kept wondering if I was getting seconds when she seemed a little hotter than usual. I certainly wasn't going south to find out with my tongue. 3 weeks after the murders, the police returned Tracy's body to me, and the following week we had her funeral. The kids, naturally, were beyond grief-stricken. And me? I was sadder than anything else. Although the police downplayed the significance of the fact, almost everyone knows what it means when two people, one of whom is married, are caught in a motel. It only added to the strangeness of the viewing and funeral, especially when longtime neighbors came to pay their respects. Most of the guys couldn't look me in the eye, and half the women seemed to be smirking all the time. And then things got even weirder when one of Tracy's co-workers, Alex Grimaldi, pointed out with absolute certainty that my youngest, Cheyenne, could be the twin sister of Mike Buttermore's youngest daughter when he was with us at the screening. Buttermore was another colleague who had worked at the bank before Tracy, and she had mentioned him in passing many times over the years. Grimaldi was a close friend of Buttermore's and was around when both of Buttermore's girls were growing up. Buttermore's youngest daughter is named Leah, and she attends Ohio State University. Once upon a time, this coincidence wouldn't have mattered to me, but thanks to one little note, I've turned into a paranoid idiot. Before the kids went home after the funeral, I made sure to save the glass each of them used so I could take a DNA sample. I didn't tell them anything, but you never know, you know. For almost 24 years, I had no reason to suspect anything, and now I see cheating partners behind every door. 2 weeks later, my newfound paranoia was justified when my children's DNA tests came back, and it turned out that 2 of them were not my children, at least not biologically. According to the tests, my son and youngest daughter are not mine. I called, they checked. No, they're not. However, they have the same father. Just not me. I go back to the bathroom to pee one more time. It only gets better. This might be even more devastating than when I found out Tracy was cheating on me. My kids, not mine. I raised those kids. I gave them all my love. And now I find out I loved another man's kids. Tracy didn't just cheat on me with one guy, she cheated on me with at least 2, and all these years I've been loving someone else's kids. So fuck it. I gave those kids love, I raised those kids, I may not be a father, but I'm their father. Tracy took that secret to the grave, and that's where it'll stay. However, I contacted my private investigator. I needed to get a DNA test on this Mike Buttermore. I needed to know if I should hate this guy, or worse. Another 2 weeks went by, and I got an answer. Apparently, long before Pete Lombardo, there was Mike Buttermore, and that affair lasted several years, or at least long enough to have 2 kids. What a gullible chump I was, and what a cheating whore she was. I needed to find out everything I could about this Buttermore, but with the police keeping an eye on me because of the ongoing murder investigation, I couldn't afford to become a stalker. By this point, I had my private investigator on speed dial. Next task, to profile Mike Buttermore for at least 22 years. It took my private investigator a month, but he was up to the task. Although none of the motel porters who recognized Lombardo recognized Buttermore either, my private investigator learned the names of several former motel employees, and upon tracking them down, several of them remembered Buttermore and the woman with whom he came regularly, my Tracy, several years ago. My private investigator then tracked down Buttermore's personal secretary, a longtime bank employee who had retired 2 years ago, and showed her a picture of Tracy. Afterward, Winona Helvey, who was saddened to learn of Tracy's murder but apparently knew and loved her from her years at the bank, arranged an afternoon of reminiscing. Turns out Tracy was considered Buttermore's work wife, helping him with most of his banking projects, helping him pick out suits for work, and apparently even picking out a few Christmas and birthday gifts for his wife. According to Winona, they were inseparable, though she never felt like it could get too personal. "She was such a sweet girl, very smart and also beautiful," Winona commented to my private investigator over tea and waffles on her front porch. When my private investigator finally got a chance to speak with Buttermore's current secretary, who has been working with him since Winona retired 2 years ago, the story was somewhat different. Allison March noted that while the couple had been close when she first came to work, About a year ago, their relationship had noticeably cooled, to the point where they barely acknowledged each other in the office. Did she tell police about this when they interviewed people in the office after the shooting? No, because no one ever bothered to talk to the lowly receptionist, she snapped, when my private investigator asked about it. I called Kerrigan and went to the police station as soon as my private investigator left. I gave him all the information my private investigator had given me, plus some DNA profiles that might be helpful. I told him I would explain what those profiles were if his lab staff found a match. 2 days later, Buttermore was arrested on suspicion of murder. Information from Winona and Allison gave the police their first real break in the case, and when Buttermore's DNA matched my children's, Kerrigan managed to get him to confess. He'd killed Tracy and her lover because she'd replaced him with a younger model after 22 years. He tried to win her back, but when she refused to even date him, something inside him snapped. Buttermore told Kerrigan that the affair began shortly after my wife gave birth to our first child. They usually met once a week and sometimes twice to have sex. When they traveled together to business conferences, they stayed in the same room even though the company paid for 2 people. And sometimes they would just tell their spouses they were at a conference when they just wanted to spend a few days together. Neither spouse doubted anything, and when Tracy got pregnant, she said that her loving husband would never doubt that the children were not his, so why ruin a good thing by talking about it? She said she loved her husband, that he was a good provider, but sex with an outside, secret partner was too much fun to pass up. I sat in the back of the courtroom every day during the Buttermore trial. When the district attorney learned that I knew nothing about Buttermore's affair with my wife of more than 20 years, he decided that I could do nothing to help the prosecution, so I was never called to testify. And that was a very good thing, because while Buttermore may have gotten sex from my wife for over 20 years, he also got a life sentence for her murder. He would never find out. But if he waited another week, I would be tried for the couple's murder. Sitting in the back of the courtroom every day, I had the opportunity to observe the daily ritual. Buttermore's devoted wife, Jen, would enter the courtroom, walk up to the railing right behind the defendant's desk, and then give him a long and heartfelt French kiss before sitting back down in her seat. I wonder what he was thinking. Turns out she wasn't too happy about Mike cheating on her with my wife all those years ago, and when she approached me with her revenge sex plan, what could I say? Maybe we'd continue this even after they were finally divorced. That would be appropriate.